Hello and welcome to episode 99 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We are at our season 2 Rings of Power recap episode.
It's been a long, long journey to get here, Sean.
Yeah, and before we get to it, I had the realization today that whenever I go to the grocery store after work, I always buy at least 2 donuts
Oh,
from the bakery and eat them like a rat in my car in the parking lot.
wait, there's a rat in your car?
I was the rat. I ate them like a rat
Oh,
in my car. Just
what
over the
is,
steering wheel, just
all
quick.
right.
I just down them quick and then I go home. I don't know why I do this, but I do this.
That reminds me of when I was teaching, first job out of college. Every day, not every day, but many days after leaving work, I would go to the Sonic and get 2 hot dogs, a Chicago dog, and some other kind of like specialty hot dog. And I would sit there and eat them in my car, and then I would go home and like cook a dinner and do grading and everything. Um, hey,
Gross. Sonic hot. At least it wasn't like 7-Eleven hot dogs.
yeah, no, these were like they were decent.
Still fast food hot dogs.
It's still a fast food hot dog. But we're not here to talk about hot dogs or donuts, um, or Monday Night Football, fantasy football. We are here to talk about season 2 of the Rings of Power. And I was texting you earlier this week that man, we are procrastinating with this recap, and I was reflecting on this personally. It's because I don't really want to talk about it. Spoiler alert for kind of later, but this wasn't a great season.
I
It
don't know
was
if this is spoiler alert because
we've been talking about it all. Yeah.
yeah, and the last episode came out like 3 weeks ago. So if you haven't caught up to Rings of Power season 2, then that's kind of on you for listening to a Rings season 2 recap episode. But we decided we're going to split it up into 3 categories that we're going to talk about. We're not going to go throughout the entire season and talk about everything because I feel like that would be too draining. So what Sam and I did, we created 3 categories: the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we each came up with 2 things for each of those categories that we want to talk about. And the difference between the bad and the ugly, I think we kind of landed on the bad is like, yeah, it's just bad writing. It's terrible. It's just bad. The ugly is like, it just wasn't necessary, like wasn't needed. Does that sound like an okay interpretation?
Yeah, I think the bad is these are significant issues with the show, the overall approach to the show, the season the season spanning plot lines and the central characters, as opposed to the ugly, which is more of smaller details, little things that you could have addressed with not, I'm not saying like, if you wanted to fix the things that are bad, you need an entirely new writer's room. If you want to fix the things that are ugly, you need to have a second draft.
So should we start with the good, the bad, or the
Well, I
ugly?
was thinking about that too. It's like, yeah, I don't want to get super heavy, like, and get heavier, but why don't we do a good, a bad, and an ugly, and kind
Okay.
of go in that order, so we can mix it up a little bit and have some positivity in sprinkled throughout.
Okay. Let's start with the best good thing that we have listed, and that is the relationship and character development of Sauron and Celebrimbor. Sam, I'll let you start with this one.
Oh, okay, sure. This was the best part of this season. The scenes with Celebrimbor and Sauron, especially during the course of the forging of the Nine Rings, then the Battle of Eregion, when you see Sauron's malevolent influence and magical power, it's great television. Um, the scenes kind of before things go to shit when they're working together and there's good feelings are great because we as viewers know that there is something's going to happen, something bad's going to happen, yet they drew us in. I frequently was a very complimentary of Charlie Vickers' acting. I think he did a fantastic job playing Sauron in this kind of otherworldly, distant way that had this tinge of evil to him, even when he wasn't fully revealed. That was phenomenal.
The
Yeah.
moments with his acting, someone pointed it out on, I think it's the Rings of Power Facebook group that I'm a part of. When Celebrimbor is looking at Sauron, Charlie Vickers has this friendly look to his face, a caring face. All of his expressions are one of concern for Celebrimbor.
Hmm.
The moment Celebrimbor looks away, you see that evil come out in him. And his ability to go back and forth between those two and have his expression show me and not tell me what's happening was phenomenal. And I agree
Hmm.
with everything you said. The acting, the portrayal by both characters. And I remember in season one kind of shitting on the choice for Celebrimbor. But I admit when I'm wrong. I was incredibly wrong with my judgment of the choice of actor for Celebrimbor because I think in season two, he is the highlight
Hmm.
of this season. And then, I mean, you could argue that Charlie Vickers is Sauron also highlight of the season, but the relationship and dynamic between the two of them, phenomenal from beginning to end. I also like in this relationship that they show Sauron's power.
Hmm.
And in this case, later in the season, when he basically puts Celebrimbor into a time loop and is able to create an illusion, not just in the forge, but outside of the forge in the like courtyard outside of his tower, where he's out there just sipping tea or coffee or whatever it is,
Hmm.
and is looking at the sunshine, listening to birds. He sees children playing. And then as soon as he goes back inside, the siege is revealed and there are people dying and screaming and running, and there's siege weapons shooting giant stones into the city. It's just really, again, really, really well done. This one aspect of the show.
Yeah, the power that Sauron has is it reminded me a little bit of like a Professor X or one of the X-Men who has the telepathic powers of just putting somebody into a wholly imagined universe while they're still kind of walking through the world as it exists.
Mm-hmm.
That was really good. And then some of the other things with Sauron's power, like the reveal that the supposed mithril that Celebrimbor had been using was actually Sauron's blood, and that's how the evil power is put into the rings, his influence, and then his, I guess, his psychic influence over Myrdania, and then his physical influence magically that caused her to fall off the edge of the wall and be killed. I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was good. I did like that relationship, although I kind of knew that it was going to go poorly for her in the end. They had some great scenes together. I really liked that. Like, I think it speaks to, again, Charlie Vickers' acting and the writers of the show in this particular plot line putting an emphasis on conversations and character dynamics, and I thought that was really good. And then then that final scene where he like basically takes over those elven guards and has them kill each other. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was pretty cool. The one thing, if we can insert a little bit of criticism into this plot line, it would have been I wanted to see more of Sauron's direct influence or his argument with the orcs that got them to eventually turn on Adar. I would have wanted to see that. We didn't. It's fine. Whatever. Sauron is the Dark Lord. The orcs report to him. Yeah, yeah, we get it.
Yeah, I just disagree with you on that one.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, let's go the bad. And this is
Yeah,
one that permeated. I don't think it was necessarily as bad in season one. Season two, I feel like this is the biggest problem with the show, that it is a mile wide and an inch deep.
totally.
And we wrote down two examples of that I think epitomize this problem with the show. And the first one for me is the Dark Wizard.
Mm.
Spend so little time with the bad guys in Rune that when something actually happens with those characters, I could give a shit. It's the complete opposite of the Sauron Celebrimbor dynamic.
Hmm.
Like what we have with the Dark Wizard, you see him at the beginning of the season when we have the stranger who we now know as Gandalf approaching Rune with the Harfoots. We see him conduct magic of like re-summoning one of those witches from season
So,
one
so yeah,
or cultists from season one.
we never really talked about that, but I guess we're supposed to assume that he kind of brought her back from the dead, or she was always dead and he like had her reform or something like
I
that.
think they're in the unseen world. So
Okay.
my understanding or my interpretation is the stranger in season one at the end basically like exorcises them back to the unseen world. They become wraiths again,
Yeah, yeah,
ghosts, whatever. But it takes the dark wizards like blood magic to bring her back or bring it back, whatever
yeah.
this cultist thing is. And after he does that in like episode 2 or 3 of this season, we never see her again. Any of them.
And she
We just
has
have to,
like zero lines of dialogue, right? Which
yeah,
so it's like there, she might as well it might as well be an inanimate object
yeah. So
for
what
all we
was the
know.
point?
Yeah.
Was the point to show us that the Dark Wizard was responsible for them in season one? Like it's so pointless.
What it just and we don't have to spend too much time on this, but what sort of things would you have wanted to see that would have given depth to that storyline?
More background, more
Yeah.
dialogue, more like let's just use the Dark Wizard. Let's count how many times we see him. We see him use blood magic to summon a cultist. He has a conversation with one of these masked raiders and says, "All right, you go handle the stranger." They fail. They go back to him. He has another conversation with them and says, "You handle the Harfoots, I'll handle the wizard." Then the next time we see him, he's in
In Hobbitville or
in
whatever.
Hobbitville.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like they didn't spend, I don't care who this guy is. I don't care.
And and you have a great actor portraying him, Ciaran. I
Exactly.
think his name is Ciaran Hinds. You know, he was Mance fucking Raider. He was Julius fucking Caesar. He's been other great character. You know, he's been in plenty of movies. Yeah, and we see him 4 times, and we have no idea what he's doing. It would have been so easy to kind of tie some of these things together where, oh, it's his influence that has caused Rune to become this arid, inhospitable place. And, that's why Tom Bombadil was there. And we'll get to that later. That's why some of the Harfoots, some of the stewards ended up leaving is because things were getting, too harsh. You could have tied a lot of these lines together, but they didn't explore that at all. And it was just a significant missed opportunity. And then there's still this kind of sort of Damocles hanging over us of, are they going to try to make this Saruman or is this supposed to be a blue wizard? And who knows how that'll go? Who knows if they will abandon this, on the kind of broader idea. Well, we'll get to that in a little bit. We'll come back to the idea of plot lines and how this could be tied up moving forward. But all right, what else on Mile Wide, Inch Deep? Because I think this is a pretty like consistent
Yeah.
overarching criticism.
The other main one for me is the relationship between Prince and King Durin. And again, it's one of those where so many subplots, they spend so much time in other areas, but not enough time in the areas to fully develop them. So when we have the scene where King Durin, which the time we do get with King and Prince Durin, I think the dynamic between the actors is great and it's very well acted, but not enough time is spent for me to care when King Durin sacrifices himself.
Oh yeah,
Like
it,
all of that dynamic. And then you get random shit thrown in as well. Where like, oh yeah, Prince Durin or now King Durin. Now that your dad's dead, your brother is trying to claim the throne, and you've got all these other dwarves, and we now have all 7 rings. And it's like, what are we doing?
yeah.
I
The
just get so frustrated.
the thing that the climactic moment in this plot line, which was King Durin sacrificing himself against the Balrog, it was so hollow because he was also he had just killed a bunch of dwarves. So to a certain extent, this was like you think. I always think about. I shouldn't say. I always think about. I've seen a lot of things recently about Boromir, and just kind of on social media, and some people are defending Boromir, and some people are criticizing. I was like, Boromir died in a way as to redeem himself for the sin of trying to take the ring from Frodo. But he didn't take the ring from Frodo, and he didn't hurt anybody physically, yet he still sinned. And the transgression was this was that action. King,
Self-sacrifice.
yeah, and self-sacrifice redeemed him. But King Durin committed murder against an unknown number of dwarves in pursuit of greed. And yeah, he was under the influence of the ring, but he still committed murder. And I try not to consume too much other commentary before we record our episodes, but this is after we did our season or episode 8 recap. They were just talking about how, like, why would any of the dwarves that still live in Moria consider that line of leaders to be legitimate now after what they have kind of demonstrably done? Like, if the king is a murderer who then, seemingly has
Betrayed his people.
betrayed his people and unleashed a gigantic fire demon, uh, to a certain extent, it's like, oh, hey, is there anybody else who wants to lead us and kind of repair this bad situation? But his big sacrifice is completely pointless because it doesn't seem like they hadn't established the threat of the Balrog to the dwarves or just in general. And then they don't talk about oh, we need to leave, or oh, we need to seal that creature off forever. It is implied that things are just going to go back to normal, generally speaking, and the only concern in the dwarven realm, like the dwarven world, is this ensuing fight for political power. And so it's like, so his big epic sacrifice was in pursuit of nothing. It's just one of those things that it just, you know, why did you spend so much time doing this? You could have easily set things up. You could have introduced the Balrog earlier. Also, you're in a position where you could have learned from the elves what it is and why it is so dangerous, instead of relying on the knowledge the audience has of the Lord of the Rings movies or the book to explain what the Balrog is and why it's dangerous. But then you don't even act like it is in the show. So those are,
Can I say,
yeah.
I read somewhere on one of my Facebook groups that I follow, and I don't know if this is true or not. Someone could have just been BSing and making it up. Somebody said in a post, I've never read The Lord of the Rings and I've never watched the movies, but they're watching this show. And they said, I totally thought the dwarves were going to bring the Balrog to save Eregion during the siege. Like that was going to be the big, like they were going to bring this beast to like save the day. And I'm like, yeah, because you didn't explain
Yeah, it's
really who or what this thing was. You have their bullshit explanation for Mithril, like a Balrog fought an elf at the top of the mountains. Like that's the only time you've ever referenced Balrogs. But
what if you have to if you're bringing up the roots of the Hithalgir as a positive in this conversation, you know that we are in dark territory with
yeah,
the yeah.
so like all of these things, and there are more examples that we're just not going to waste all of the time to talk about every little example. But two, I think for me, and we don't really talk about that as a whole, but too many subplots
Hmm.
and not enough time spent on the stories that matter to the overall plot. If you take out the Harfoots, which I hope season 2 kind of set it up to where the Harfoot storyline kind of comes to a close. If you stop wasting time there, if you stop wasting time in the Southlands, if you really focus in on Numenor, Eregion / Linden, and Mordor, Khazad-dûm, like to me, you'll be able to tell a much better story because you're actually going to be spending time developing those core storylines.
Hmm.
And that's even that, like Rune, Gandalf, like that's another storyline that they
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. I mean,
So too many different things.
yeah, it's a mile wide and an inch deep. Okay. Well, and we should say maybe our segue here into our first ugly is that when you are doing a show in a manner that is a mile wide and an inch deep, in order to connect with your audience, you are going to do fan service. And this can take in a whole variety of different manifestations. So, Sean, what are some of the examples of fan service that we felt were ugly? So not show breaking, but certainly negative aspects of this season. Just name a few if you want to. I'll come in on a few of my own.
Well, I'll do one, and I'm googling some of the instances where they actually stole stuff. So what I'm going to do is just talk about one big thing that's on my mind, and then I'll let you kind of fill in while I do some research.
Sure.
So for me, the two that we talked about pre-show, the use of Narsil for seemingly it could serve a much larger purpose, but at least in this instance and where we're at in Numenor in the show, it seemed kind of unnecessary to just drop Narsil as being just given to Elendil at this point. And then the use of Ents. Ents are pivotal beings in The Lord of the Rings. And when you look at how they're used in this season, it really feels like they used Ents just so they could say, hey, look, something you know. Here's some Ents.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, they disappear for the rest of the season. They're in one scene, and then we never see them again.
Yeah.
So that might be something that they come back to, and they have a much more important role going forward in season 3. It's hard to believe that's going to be the case. But yeah,
I mean,
what are
so
your
just
thoughts?
there. Well, the I agree with you completely on the Narsil. That to me was just an example of them superficially mimicking the movie, and in both the like the way that Elendil physically interacts with the swords, very similar to how Aragorn interacts with Narsil in Return of the King. But then just this like really quick inserting it into the show where Narsil doesn't need to be this huge plot line or this huge plot point. It's not established at all prior to its first appearance. And so if it is significant, it should have been established, at least discussed at some point. I think in our season 1 commentary is talking about the Ring of Barahir, which was it is an heirloom that Aragorn wears in the Lord of the Rings timeline, and it was passed down literally from the First Age, and it was actually a gift from, I believe it was from Finrod to Barahir, who was a man in the First Age, and it symbolized friendship and service and a kind of debt of honor between the elves and the men, and that would have been such a good thing to have inserted into that dynamic. And so I think their failure to do that, but then going off and including something like Narsil in such a ham-handed way is a great example of how they just don't understand the significance of things in this universe. And I would even say the Palantir is another example of that. It's used very poorly. It's visually interesting, but dramatically. So some other examples of this type of fan service thing I think are things like the spiders that we see in Isildur's first few scenes where what are they like, where did they come from? This was not a haunted forest, immediately preceding the eruption of the volcano. What are they doing here? Oh, they're here because Lord of the Rings fans expect some sort of big spider creature. And we never hear from them again. Not that we needed to hear from them again, but they're never referenced again. And they kind of came out of nowhere. And to our earlier point about mile wide, inch deep, it took up a lot of screen time that could have been spent exploring Isildur's character journey, specifically his interaction with the other people that exist in the Southlands. And this ties in, I think, with the Ents portion, which is the Ents were completely superfluous to the conflict in this geography, which is going to be between, well, excuse me, which should have been between the quote wild men, the non-wild men denizens of the Southlands and Pelargir, and now the Númenóreans. And that is the interesting conflict. So maybe the Ents will reemerge in future seasons, but I think as it stands, it's just something that, oh, people who like Lord of the Rings are gonna love seeing some Ents here. And so they'll show up and we'll kind of have some weird interactions with them, which ultimately I think were kind of pointless and stupid, and then they're gonna go away and we never see them again. We what we don't get is an army of Ents showing up to save the day at Eregion. We don't see Ents doing anything that impacts the world. They're there to smack Eastrid and have a conversation with Arendir. Um, yeah, any other fan service items that you wanted to touch on?
Just every time the show blatantly took a line from the Lord of the Rings trilogy and just kind of tried to make it their own. And I think one of my best examples, there really aren't any articles where people have gone through season 2 and created a list.
That's surprising.
So that's what I couldn't find. But the one example that it is coming to mind that it put such a bad taste in my mouth, it had to do with Gil-galad
Mm.
and Galadriel. Galadriel says, "Oh, I saw something." And then he goes, "Oh, so you mean you began to see something that has not yet come to pass?" Which is an exact steal of Galadriel's line from The Lord of the Rings. And that stuff, like, that made me throw up in my mouth a little bit because I'm like, be original.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to trash so many other aspects of the lore, but then steal things like directly from like the same material, then why are you changing things to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
So there's way more instances than that. It bothers me too much to rewatch the entire series and like
I
look for all of those moments, but there are definitely a handful of them
I'm
that really piss
surprised.
me off.
I'm surprised that there isn't an article that breaks down all of the instances. There might be some sort of like YouTube video that's like just a super cut of all the stolen lines. The one that gets me, which maybe we talked about in the moment, but it was when Arendir and Isildur are sucked underground under the mud by that worm creature,
Mm.
and then it spits them back up. I think it was implied that Estrid like did something to prompt it to spit them back up. I don't exactly know, but then also Arendir just cuts it open and they jump out. And then he has that line of, "Oh, there are, you know,
Mm.
like
The
older."
Gandalf quote,
Yeah, the Gandalf quote when he's talking about things in the depths of Moria, which is completely out of context. Like
the
it's a
Southlands.
fucking mud pit in a forest, right? And again, it was one of those things where is the show implying that these things are the result of Sauron's influence? If so, that's like a really tenuous connection, and they should have demonstrated that explicitly. It would have been cool. It would have underlined Sauron's power and his threat and how Sauron does actually threaten the entirety of Middle Earth, because even people as far away as in the Southlands are dealing with it. But no, it was just this weird stolen line of dialogue from Gandalf that didn't belong. And there are tons of other examples, and it goes beyond stolen dialogue too. It's like the scene with Galadriel and Elrond when they have that horse race through Lindon, basically just so many different visuals are stolen from the Arwen horse race against the Nazgul, and then some other instances of, I think, primarily like Elrond. I can't remember if it's Elrond like riding up the Dimril Dale to give Narsil to Aragorn, but some other visuals in the Lord of the Rings movies, and it's just and again, it was one of those things where, oh, so you're telling me Elrond and Galadriel had a horse race all the way from Eregion to Lindon, and those horses aren't dead, or like they decided to race the final couple of miles, and what were they doing for the entire stretch of that journey up to this point? It's just they go out of their way to create logical lapses or plot holes in order to achieve some sort of ephemeral ephemeral nostalgia for a movie, where they could just what they should be doing is focusing on creating their own thing that stands on its own. Anyway, any
Yeah,
other comments on
we're
fan
being too
service?
long-winded.
We are.
We're just
We
gonna
are.
have to go fast
Let's
here.
go
Yeah.
fast.
So the next thing is Sauron backstory. Now, this is a huge change from actual Tolkien lore, but I honestly didn't mind how it was handled. The whole idea of the orcs living through Morgoth's basically torture and enslavement of orcs and evil creatures, and the orcs, along with Adar, turning on Sauron, murdering him, but not being able to kill him completely. And then that formation into from Sauron into who we know as Halbrand. And we said after we watched episode one that I really would have liked season one to have started this way. And if you got rid of all of that shitty mystery box stuff about who's Sauron, and you would have just told us from the beginning, and we had a clear linear path of Sauron to Halbrand to influencing Galadriel, like all of these different things, I think it would have been a much better show. And there's a lot of aspects, like we talked about this, their stupid story about how they created Mithril in this universe. That's a change for the worse. I think what they did with Sauron could have been a change for the better had they put it in a different part of the series. I don't know. What do you think about Sauron's new backstory?
Yeah, I think I generally agree with you. What I would have wanted was a little bit more time with Sauron and Adar that establishes Adar's like deep concern about what Sauron is proposing to do. Because I think one of his lines in that speech is, and many orcs will die. I was like, okay, are you just announcing that for the first time? Probably maybe to this large group, but you and Adar would have had a conversation. Like there were other things that led up to him being killed in that moment that I think we could have gotten that would have gone out of their way to establishing Adar's character better for the course of the rest of the show, of the season. That being said, it was still interesting. I liked it. It was a good departure from the lore, or a expansion on the lore. I agree with you that there were some other things that you could have done going all the way back to season one that would have enhanced this. I think obviously we're far beyond that point, but overall, I liked what they did with him.
Back to the bad. The Harfoot subplot. Just wasted time,
Annoying.
completely annoying. And like we said when we were talking about the too many subplots, hopefully this is one that finally hits the cutting floor, or when they're looking at how to move on into season three. It's just unnecessary. I don't care about the characters enough. I mean, they did their job of bringing the stranger to Rune, and now they're all leaving on foot. So they're just going to go found the Shire. Do we need to see that?
See you in the Shire in 3,000 years. Yeah, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, I think like technically speaking too, I mean, maybe some of them will go and live in the Gladden Fields, right? And we'll get, oh my God, is
What?
is is Smeagol alive? No. No, no,
No.
no, 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 no. Of course not. No, 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 no. No, no, no. Never mind. Sorry. I was confused. For a second I thought that he found the ring shortly after it fell off
No.
Isildur's, but no. Okay. Edit that out, Sean. Edit that out.
No, I'm leaving it in. Crisis averted.
Yeah. Okay. We don't need to spend the Harfoots are the most pointless. It's the most removed from the central drama of the show. It is also the most annoying characters. They like portrayals. I think I really do not like what they do and how they act. We talked about the offensive Irish accents back in season one. They're still stupid. They're still psychopaths, but they could be cut and the show would be better for it.
Again, this is one of those where I feel like they were only included because hobbits were so important and pivotal to the events of Lord of the Rings. And I understand if you look at like the events of Lord of the Rings, hobbits were like best friends with the King of Gondor and were responsible for Isengard falling, and like they had pivotal roles in all of these different events throughout the three books in Lord of the Rings, but they're not necessary. We don't need
Yeah.
them. This is a
And
story about elves and Sauron.
yeah, I mean, and the hobbits in particular served a purpose in the overall progression of the Legendarium, in that in this end of the third age, fourth age, the elves are gone. It's up to the remaining the elves are gone, the dwarves are retreating. It's up to the races of men, including the hobbits, to kind of take over. This is exemplified in their actions in the War of the Ring. We're not in the end of the third age, beginning of the fourth age. We're in the second age. We're in an earlier time where the elves are the preeminent power. The humans are less so, and the hobbits aren't even on the scene. And so it would have been appropriate from a lore perspective and a good decision from a plot and overall, I think, show quality perspective to eliminate the hobbit-like characters entirely.
Next up is the physical reality of the world. I'm going to let you take a stab at this one first.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is something where, as a player of Dungeons and Dragons and as a dungeon master, I take something like this very seriously. Where if you establish a world, you need to it needs to have rules that are followed, and that means that you have stakes, and that your character actions may have consequences. And we just had far too many examples of rules being seemingly made up or broken to suit the purposes of the writers. So we have a ton of examples of well, that was a ton of examples, but many examples of kind of plot armor. Galadriel should be dead. She jumped off of a cliff. She would probably have been impaled on tree branches, but she survived without, seemingly very few, very few harms. Elrond jumped over a waterfall.
It really was like her fall was like 1,000+ foot fall. Like I understand in the world, elves are superhuman, but I don't think they would be able to survive 1,000 feet off a cliff.
Yeah, I mean, like elves. A lot of elves died in this show. The elves, seemingly just normal orcs, killed elves relatively easily and in large numbers in the episode where Galadriel jumped off that cliff. And then there are other things that just are annoying because they don't make sense in the physics of the world. So the Ents smacking Estrid into a rock, she would have been dead or severely injured. She seems fine. Isildur took a knife deep in the leg, then he seemed fine. The catapults that they
Whoa, whoa,
used.
whoa. With
Sorry.
Isildur, Bronwyn's son healed him, man.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I forgot
If
the.
he wasn't there and he didn't get all the training that Bronwyn gave him about being a healer,
Hmm.
Isildur would have died, dude.
Sure, sure. Azilur would have died before he even got to Pelargir from the nature of that wound, and he certainly wouldn't have had the ability to fight the like four dudes that attacked him before Arondir showed up to save him. So he'd be dead. Catapults cannot destroy mountains, causing river blocking avalanches. That was completely ridiculous. I think Nori and Poppy survived being sucked up into a tornado and then dropped from several dozen or maybe over 100 feet. They would be dead. And then there are other things that it's not necessarily like the physical reality of the world, but just physics or reality adjacent things. So I there's a lot of fight choreography that I didn't really care for, particularly Galadriel's fight with that huge group of orcs when she quote unquote saves herself. I've complained about this before.
No, for me, it's orcs just being flammable.
Or the orcs, yeah, the orcs being flammable.
The number of times where there's not like
But there were more
a
examples of this, weren't there?
oh, there's so many. Like
Yeah.
in the Siege of Eregion, like the number of times it'll just be like a fire arrow that hits an orc and they burst into flames without any propellant. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell?
Yeah. So not only do orcs have families, which by the way, that point does not appear anywhere in our list here. We really didn't talk about it, but not only do orcs have families, but they're also made of gasoline, apparently. And then the final kind of aspect of this physical reality is just that the entire build up to and execution of the Battle of Eregion, I felt was thoroughly disappointing, especially when you compare it to the way that other battles in the Lord of the Rings universe had been portrayed on screen, specifically Helm's Deep and Pelennor Fields. In both of those examples, we had an excellent layout. We had a clear understanding of the layout of the battle itself. We understood how the battle was progressing, either positively or negatively for the various forces involved. We understood the stakes. At Helm's Deep, if the fortress is breached, everybody's going to get killed. The women and children are killed. The people of Rohan are extinguished. Saruman wins. It's over. Pelennor Fields, the city falls, things are over, Sauron wins, all that good stuff. The same is true for like Battle of the Mornon or whatever else. Eregion, very challenging to establish what was the physical layout of this battle. How did the battle progress? We jump around from scene to scene. The forces show up. We don't know where they are in relation to other forces. And then as far as stakes go,
And the elves just feel like they're in like a 100-foot stretch of wall in front of the city.
yep.
When you look at the walls themselves, it's massive.
Yes. There's that issue too. Again, it goes to this idea like I don't think they have a clear understanding of what the physical reality of the world is, and things change in order to suit their writing needs or to create a cool visual. And in some cases, it's effective when things look cool, but then it's hollow because, it relied on a handful of catapults destroying a mountain, which again is physically impossible. So, yeah, that's it as far as my points go. Sean, anything else you wanted to add to that, or should we move on?
I think we move on. I added my little points as we were going.
Cool. Okay, so the next topic is our good topic of Tom Bombadil. And Sean, you wanted to clarify here.
Yes. My clarification is, like I said when we were talking about the warm up to season 2 coming out, and we discovered who the actor portraying Bombadil was going to be, I said, I have a feeling that I'm going to really like how the character is portrayed, but I'm not going to like how they use him. And that was 100% correct. I think Bombadil himself, I was incredibly happy with this portrayal of Tom Bombadil. Like, to me, this is the character from the book. Really well done. But then I come back to, why was he in Rune?
Yeah.
Why wasn't he at the Withywindle? Why does he seemingly care about the fate of the world when he normally doesn't in every other iteration that we see of him? So, I mean, it's tough because, I mean, some people might look at that and go, okay, yeah, I don't like the character for a couple of those reasons that I do like the character, but, or those things of like, why is he in Rune? Why does he care? That might be strong enough for people to like move away from the character a little bit. But it was a small role. He was in maybe like 2 or 3 episodes. I think it was really well acted. The dynamic between Tom Bombadil and who we now know as Gandalf uh, was pretty well done. I liked those interactions, but positive for me.
Yeah, I would generally agree. I think this was probably the most appropriate, and this was the best option for portraying Tom Bombadil on screen. If you portrayed him as described in the book and in some of the art that you see from, people who are established within, that working officially, Tom Bombadil is a very goofy character. It's not just his, what is it, yellow jacket and blue boots or whatever it is. Like these are like they're garish and like outlandish, and he's like a banana. It's like a yellow banana. I think they did a good job in toning down some of those aspects that would not have translated well to the screen for a modern audience. Um, but
His colorful clothing are in the background though, so
they are
that
yeah.
is a good Easter egg. Those
Yeah,
do exist.
yeah, it's like yeah, there's some yellow clothing or whatever, but it's not super, it's not like, like, was it Curious George and the man with the yellow hat or whatever? It's like, it's a
Mhm.
ridiculously yellow hat. That's not what we have. There's no Goldberry, which, no Goldberry on displayed on screen.
We hear
We hear Goldberry, that was interesting. That was fun. Um, yeah, but it was one of those things where, yeah, great portrayal. What's he doing here? He doesn't care. It was so they butchered the character, but they did as good of a job with the portrayal as you could get, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it was an enjoyable part of the show. All right,
Back to the bad,
the bad.
Galadriel.
Yep,
And
that's
I think we summed it up enough where we said, again, this has nothing to do with the actress, Morpeth Clark. I think with the script she's given, I think she does a really good job. That being said, I hope she's not the protagonist moving forward. And it kind of feels that way where they've kind of set it up where it might be more of an Elrond focus because he seemed to kind of take the reins at like the
the
midway
rings.
point at the midway point of this season. But even from the beginning, there was just way too many instances of what felt like the writers not knowing how to write this character. And I don't want people to think like any kind of like, oh, elves, rings, and nerdy things is being sexist. No, we love the fact that Galadriel was included, and we loved the fact that she was being portrayed as like this military leader.
I'll go I'll go one beyond. I think you could have a female action-oriented character be the main character in this show and a love interest to Elrond, but it shouldn't be Galadriel. It should be Celebrian, about whom we know next to nothing. You would not be offending anybody. You would not be messing with any character backstory, and you could get all of the things that you want. And then Galadriel could still be a character, and she could be a non-action focused character who is wise, who is stately, who is a sounding board, and you could have this really good dynamic of she and Elrond and Galadriel and Celeborn and the dynamics of parents-in-law, daughter, son, or excuse, yeah, parents-in-law, daughter, and son slash husband, love interest. That would be interesting. That would be good. But instead, we get this really, I think, very bad Galadriel, and by bad I mean she's unlikable, she's incompetent, yet she is too lucky. She's more lucky than she deserves, and people defer to her when they should not.
And we've said multiple times, she is supposed to be one of the wisest characters. She's of the Noldor. She left Valinor with Feanor. She's been around for an incredibly long time. And she makes some of the stupidest decisions that one of the wisest elves in Middle Earth should know better. And it just gets really old. And like we said, Elrond is kind of set up to kind of take over the role of protagonist of the show. And hopefully we get that.
Indeed.
Next up, temporal reality of the world.
Yeah, this time and space. So
Yeah.
this was an ugly, distracting aspect of season two. Is we have no understanding at all how much time has passed since the events in season one. We have no idea how much time is covered in any individual episodes. We have no idea how long it takes people to go between the various locations. And again, it seems to be one of those things where things take as long as the writers need them to take in order for the show to be produced. And there is no, similar to how there's not really a physical reality of the world where there are rules that people have to follow or suffer the consequences, there doesn't seem to be any sort of temporal reality of the world. And so it's completely unclear how any of these events are causal with one another if they're not explicitly shown to take place in the same place with the same characters in the same day. Anything else on this, Sean?
Well, and then even with episode one of this season, if you, episode one, I think is a great example of how time doesn't matter in terms of, well, you have all the issues of people going back and forth between Numenor and Middle Earth at like the blink of an eye. But then episode one really sums it up. You're led to believe that Sauron is in that puddle of mud for the show wants you to think like thousands of years because
Yeah,
we have the stalactite and
which
stalagmite
which
growing.
neither of us caught on
Caught.
to
No.
on the first watch, and I almost missed it on my second watch, but for like pausing and looking very carefully,
Yeah.
not it's not clear at all.
So we don't know feasibly how much time has passed. The show wants you to think it's been quite a long time. Then the next thing you have is Sauron falling out of the side of a hill as a goop monster, eating a woman, basically. And are we led to believe that that's like up north in like Thangorodrim?
I mean, maybe it was cold, like there was
Yeah.
snow on the ground, but again, they don't
But it
tell us.
wasn't the frozen wastes of Galadriel as she's
The
trying to find
forward
this
wave?
place. Yeah.
No. So yeah, like he obviously moved from where he was. I
But
don't
he
know.
but no, because he like crawls out of the mountain and then falls to the ground. It's not like he crawled thousands of miles in his weird goopy form. So let's just keep going. He takes over this cart, and then immediately the next thing we see is him going towards this same army of orcs that was apparently with him at like the same group that just killed him. So like they want you to think that it's taking forever for this form to happen. But then what they show you makes you think that it's happening immediately. And the whole idea of time passing, they do such a terrible job of portraying that and having it fit the plot. Like characters show up just in time in season one. Like, how does Numenor even know that the Southlands are about to be attacked?
Oh
And
yeah.
they're just there.
There yeah.
And it's that stuff like it gets really old when it just doesn't make sense.
Yep. I mean, the all of the issues with Sauron's quote unquote storyline in episode one, that could have been an entire episode or like half of an episode, like devote a significant amount of screen time to establishing the journey of Sauron from being a goop in a mountain cavern thousands of years ago to becoming the Halbrand character. Not a few minutes where you didn't do like we had no establishment of does he know where he's going? How does he know where to go? Like how does he get from where he was? So like famously the Forward Wraith is on the west side of the Misty Mountains. So he travels right like the west side of the Misty Mountains and north of Angmar. That's why that's where it is. And it
It's
wasn't
yeah, it's really far north and west.
yeah, so if that's where he was, which I don't think there's we that's what we have to believe, that's what we're going on, is that he was in the Forward Wave. His blood seeped into the mountains, recongealed. Thousands of years later, he emerges as a blob. He didn't
Eats a
tr
rat.
he didn't travel thousands of miles subterraneanly. I don't even underground. We're not shown that that's what happened. That's what happened. Then so he oozes his way again, hundreds or thousands of miles to the south or to the west, to the ocean. Eventually, like I don't know. It's again, it's one of those things where just write it differently, so there aren't these plot holes. But the biggest thing was just the time travel that our known characters go through. Because like we know Lyndon and Reagan, people go back and forth seemingly at will. And it only becomes an issue when the timing of it all becomes an issue when the writers need it to be. Otherwise, it is, it happens in 5 minutes. People popping into and popping out of Khazad-dûm whenever it's convenient. Yeah, Numenor seemingly being just over the horizon and not like thousands of miles west, in like literally in between Middle Earth and Valinor. Anyway, we should probably move
Yeah.
on to our final. I added a fifth point to the.
Well, we still have to talk about the
Oh, I'm
faithful
sorry. I
betrayal.
didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. That was
Your
highlighted.
you your fifth point is going to be our finale for we'll talk about something positive at the end.
Okay.
But the next thing is the portrayal of the faithful in Numenor. I like the dynamics between the characters who will go on to found Gondor and Arnor, they're striving to maintain the old beliefs in the Valar. It's cool seeing the shrines and the Valar worship amongst the faithful, and then seeing that political dynamic of the people of Numenor who will maybe eventually become members of the cult of Morgoth. So I am excited to see where that goes and how it's portrayed as we get further into the show.
I agree. I think even a little bit of detail about the culture of Numenor is interesting, and it makes us care about this culture and about the people that are represented. And I think it's also something that's very relatable, right? Like this stories of religious oppression and violence are, unfortunately something that we see in the news nowadays. Students of history are very familiar with it. So it's something that instantly connects to an audience, especially, the type of audience that is inclined to watch Lord of the Rings or fantasy stuff. I think it's a pretty consistent thing. So this was really good. And I think the actual one of the actual really, I'll call it, powerful scenes in this season was the death of, what was his name? Valendil? Not Valendil. Was it? What was his name? I just said it's powerful. Now I can't remember his name. The guy who's Kemen stabs.
Oh yeah, it's
What's
like
his name? What's his name?
Valandir or something,
Was it Valendil?
something like that. Yeah,
Anyway, like, sorry, I forgot your name, buddy. Your death scene was awesome. Like that was really good, but it came in the context of this specific aspect of Numenorian culture and this emergent conflict, which is going to be a source of drama for hopefully season 3 and then an ongoing. So that was really good. Anything else about the faithful or just Numenor in general? Because I thought there were some good aspects of this season.
yep. I've got nothing else. The next bad thing, which I will continue to be on this hill because Gilgalad is one of my favorite characters in the extended lore of Middle Earth. They just keep doing him dirty in this show. And what purpose does he serve? He clearly really doesn't have any real power as the king of the Noldor in Middle Earth. Because even Elrond, his herald, doesn't answer to him. He goes to Círdan, who they say is even wiser than Gilgalad. So I don't know. I wish they didn't portray him to be so dumb. And I know that's probably not even the best word to use, but he's just a dummy in this show, and I want him to be smarter.
Yeah, no, he's really dumb. He's also used poorly. I think his entrance in the battle scene where he says something like the king goes where he's needed. Like, dude, you showed up with like 5 other people and we're all gonna be killed.
We're
Um,
all about to be taken
yeah,
hostage.
like way to show up and give them this really important chess piece, you moron. Yeah, that they're doing him dirty. I think you've said it since season 1. I continue to agree with you. It's unfortunate. Gilgalad is supposed to be the like last great noble. He dies in battle against Sauron. It takes it's Sauron wearing the One Ring to kill him, and he should not have been taken prisoner by a couple of grubby orcs outside of Eregion. He should have been the one like leading a cavalry charge to save the day, and like he should have had an epic showdown with an orc captain or killed the fucking troll or something cool. Instead, we get district manager Gil-galad showing up with some TPS reports, and it's terrible.
Our last ugly thing, showrunners not understanding the source material.
As exemplified by,
Elrond kissing his future mother-in-law.
yeah, gross, absolutely disgusting. Yeah, it's just like they don't understand these two characters. Like this, it's never been more clear that they didn't. And excuse me, I'm forgetting because it's been so long since I watched the episode. He did not put the pin in her mouth, right? Like he handed her the pin. So
Yep.
it wasn't even a cover for something. It was actually just a kiss, or maybe it was a distraction, but it was a kiss nonetheless. So yeah, just why'd you do that? It was just one of those things where I think even at that point too, the show had built up a season, a few episodes worth of goodwill and some positive momentum, and this just completely undercut that and took the wind out of our sails for the final episode.
And then to end on a positive note, God damn, does this show look good?
Yeah, and probably, and I maybe the most visually impressive scene for me this season was the Barrow-wight fight with Elrond, Galadriel, and their crew against the Barrow-wights, seemingly that were animated by the resurgent power of Sauron. I know I had my complaints about individual aspects of this fight, like I do for a lot of the other fights, but visually, this was incredible. Cinematic scale and still kind of one of the images that I will have in my mind, positive images in my mind of season 2.
Sam, overall thoughts of the second season?
2 steps forward, 1 step back, but I don't like the path that you're walking. So they have earned a season 3, I will say, probably on the strength of Sauron and Celebrimbor, but that dynamic is gone, and so they're going to have to replace it with something of quality. I think we've outlined a few ideas for what we think they should do, what they might do. It's up to them to make it work. What do you think?
I liked this season a lot more than season 1. I think it could be a lot better if they trim the fat. I think one of my problems with the direction we're going is 2 of my favorite characters of the show are now dead. And I struggle to find other characters that I'm invested in to feel like I care.
It took me a second to remember who the second character was, and that's Adar. So Celebrimbor is dead and Adar is dead. And I would agree. And I just thought to myself, well, we should care about Isildur, right?
I don't
Because
care.
I
No.
know that's the thing. I kind of don't care. And I also think you could have completely, thinking about ways to trim the fat, you could have completely cut Isildur out of season 1 and season 2, and you'd be just fine, and you could introduce him now.
Yeah.
You could introduce him in season 3 as Elendil is going back to the west of Numenor to reconnect with his family, to to pick up the mantle of the Lord of that area, and Isildur could be introduced and be one of the characters that we care about going forward.
I was about to say, let me make a list of all the characters I don't care about, but that list is too long. So I'm going to give you the list of characters that I kind of care about
Okay.
and that I hope they focus on.
Okay.
Sauron, who I know they will.
Yep.
Elrond.
Yep.
And Tom Bombadil, who is a minor character who will not be in season 3.
He will not be in season 3. Okay.
So that's just where I'm at.
You don't care about Theo?
Nope, not at all.
You don't care about the Lord of Pelargir?
The self-proclaimed. I'm the Lord of Tacoma.
Yeah, no.
Just stupid. Anyway, that's season 2, everybody.
Yeah, season 2. Better, not good.
But better.
But better. Better. We'll take better, especially if you're going to give it to us. We'll take better. So yeah, we'll see. And so this was episode 99 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. So episode 100.
Yeah, you want to talk our podcast mead?
We got, let's have a...
If you want to remember the taste while you were visiting.
Yeah, I'll try to remember. So why don't we can have a mead recap episode, and maybe just kind of a celebration of 100 episodes. And maybe I'll crack a bottle of mead.
Right on.
Or if you could send me a bottle. I don't know if that's possible to do.
I don't think legally I can. Next week, everybody.
Yeah.
Our 100 episode. We'll talk mead. We'll talk maybe just our favorite fantasy things.
Yeah, just a general episode, a Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things chit chat.
Favorite topics we've covered in the 100 episodes that we've been here.
There we go.
A little flashback.
Yeah,
on
flashback.
things we've talked about. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.